Welcome back to PS2 in Review. My name is Ethan, and today we'll be looking at Sly 2 Band of Thieves. It was developed by Sucker Punch Productions and released for the PlayStation 2 in North America on September the 14th, 2004, and in PAL regions on October the 29th. It is the second installment of the Sly Cooper franchise, and was met with positive reviews on release. But is Sly 2 all it's cracked up to be, or is this robbery more of a botch job? Let's find out in this installment of PS2 in Review. Before we get started, this video wouldn't be possible without TV production classes at Jefferson College. These courses are part of the college's new Digital Communications degree program. Students have the opportunity to learn the basics of video production, including videography and editing. Students can also create content in the JCTV Media Studio on campus, where we are recording this video right now. You can learn more about all that by emailing us at jctv@jeffco.edu. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, let's take a look at Sly 2 Band of Thieves. First off, let me just right off the bat, the box art looks so much better. You've actually got an image on here with characters and a neat logo. You got this great shot of Sly against the moon. Just much more distinctive all around, which I think you also get with the spine, which, sitting right next to Sly 3, just looks great. Just looks so much better. As opposed to that like yellow text you've got with Sly 1. It doesn't jump as much, and I think this looks fantastic. Speaking of fantastic, I also think the box on the back looks great. This like integrated design with the building that bleeds into the middle. I mean, and it just looks like one continuous image in so many, like it flows really well. This is an example of really excellent graphic design. And then you've got these comic book style bubbles there, sort of thought rectangles. You know, I'm a big comic guy. No idea what that's called. Thought boxes, I guess. Something like that. Are you in or out? Yeah, it's a great looking box. Popping it open. Disc looks great. It's got its own unique art on there, which is cool. You don't always see that. First of all, you've got the manual, which wonderfully is still written in the style as if Bentley is talking to you, which I think is super neat. In addition to that, also for whatever reason, my manual still has the subscription not filled out for PlayStation Underground magazine, which is kind of neat. You don't see that all the time. Now going back to the box, the extra, which I was pleased to find in this copy, is this awesome poster / map. The map on this side, which is upside down. No, it's not. It's upside right. Got World 1. Some of the mission locations on there. World 2. And World 3. Which looks great. It's super cool. And then you got this really nice poster, which I'll try and lay out for you to see. It's hard to tell with the camera, but you've got your little credits there at the top, which goes down all the way to the bottom there. Looks fantastic. Great shadows, really cool shot. I love this. You don't see this enough. I quite enjoy it. Alright, let's box this puppy back up. But yeah, no, that's the box for Sly 2. I think it's a massive improvement over the first one. A cool extra with that poster. Yeah, just all together. Looks great on the shelf. Love this box. Alright, let's hop into the game. Part 1. Playing a fan favorite. Whenever I am confronted with a fan favorite game, or one of the greatest games of all time, I do my best to put it in its context. When I played the original Baldur's Gate, for example, I didn't enjoy myself much mechanically, but I could still appreciate how spectacular it must have been on release. I kept in mind the vast landscapes, the music, the character customization, and the titular city itself. All of these things on their own were fantastic, and yet I did not find myself having a lot of fun. If you've ever played the classic Black Isle RPGs, you will know that 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons rules are opaque at the best of times and downright hostile at the worst of times. Moments when I was able to enjoy the game were still stained with the dread that eventually I would have to enter combat again. Sly 2 Band of Thieves is not as obtuse as Baldur's Gate. When you are playing as Sly Cooper, the game works as intended, as a light-hearted, globe-trotting adventure with fun stealth levels, colorful characters, and at times, positively delightful set pieces. But when the game breaks from this mold, when it dives headlong into minigames, playable characters not suited to navigating the open world, and repetitive mission design, it can become frustrating, dull, or downright mean. With a gap year between releases, Sly 2 had more time to iterate and experiment with its level design. It takes the mostly linear template of the original and attempts to up the scale significantly. However, instead of balancing the feature creep with a focus on core gameplay, the game focuses on novelty to the exclusion of quality. Baldur's Gate similarly lost its way. Its vast scale did not, for me, make up for the lack of narrative depth. In context of its release and its contemporaries, Sly 2 is perhaps a fantastic game. It attempts many interesting experiments, but not all of them have stood the test of time. In some ways, that makes Sly 2 the prototypical PS2 game, a game with great vision and limited ability to execute on that vision. Part 2. Newfound Freedom. And what a vision it is. Sly 2 is a gorgeous game to look at. Dev Madan returns as art director, and he knocks it out of the park once again. In a GDC talk given before the release of Sly 2, Madan said he told the team he wanted no right angles, and I believe it. This angular and intentionally cartoony design has aged like fine wine. Even compared to Sly 1, Sly 2 is a massive step up in terms of visual clarity and environmental detail. When I first played the opening level, I was stunned at how much richer the details were in this opening room alone. The lighting in particular is really stunning, with much smoother transitions between bright lights and dim ones. This even has a mechanical effect. The flashlight beams of patrolling guards now have a slightly dim edge that allows the player some grace to slip by the beam undetected. This small nuance makes encounters that would otherwise be pass-fail into frantic scrambles for the nearest hiding spot. The attention to detail is also present in the framing of scripted sequences. Staying with the beginning of the game for a moment, this chase sequence with Carmelita has more visual pressure than her levels in the first game. The camera goes tight on Sly, and you run towards the camera like a Crash Bandicoot level. She also shoots at you more than once every 5 minutes, which helps the chase feel like it has consequences if you make a false move. Once you escape Carmelita, you are brought to the first of 8 open-world hub areas. From an art design perspective, these hubs are incredible. From the dark blues of Paris to the deep greens of the Indian jungle, each one is distinct and beautiful. The music in these hubs is fantastic as well. Bill Wolford and Peter McConnell are credited as sound and music in the game's manual, and they did a wonderful job on the score and the sound design. In the game's opening hours, I was thoroughly impressed by all of these enhancements over the previous entry. As I kept playing, I found that the story had gotten some tune-ups as well. Once I had gotten over admiring the art direction, I was pleased to see that the characters were more defined as well. Bentley and Murray are no longer just companions who mostly hang out at headquarters. Each is now a playable character with unique traversal mechanics and unlockable special moves. They both get moments to shine within the narrative, such as Bentley's solo mission to free Sly and Murray from prison, the best chapter in the game, later on. I found this to be quite refreshing. The game now feels much more like a gang planning and executing heists, rather than a solo adventure starring Sly Cooper. Each member's skills are highlighted and focused on in their respective levels. Bentley is the hacker and explosives expert, and Murray is the muscle. We will get into how I feel about how fun these characters are to play later, but suffice it to say that as a narrative choice, I really enjoy their presence. Carmelita also gets her status quo shaken up a bit with the introduction of a new lady cop, Interpol agent Neela, serving as Carmelita's sidekick at the start of the game. Unlike Carmelita, Neela actually seems interested in Sly's flirtatious banter and seems to find him charming enough to let him get away with a few burglaries in exchange for help defeating various bad guys. Carmelita herself is still mostly a non-character, though she does briefly go on the run from Interpol. She remains dedicated to bringing Sly and friends to justice. She does have one moment at the very end of the game where, having captured Sly at long last, she lets her hair down, and the two share the first real conversation they've ever had. It's a sweet moment. Aside from the fact that we don't actually get to hear any of the conversation, until Sly gives Carmelita the slip at the last minute, of course.
Floating away on the night breeze, I could faintly make out Carmelita's voice.
I'll find you, Cooper!
Clockwork does return from the first game, but not in the fashion you might expect. Instead, the main villains are the Claw Gang, spelled K-L-A-W-W, because of course it is. Each member of the gang has taken possession of various parts of Clockwork's body. When we last saw Clockwork, he was melting in a volcano, Terminator 2 style, but apparently enough of his body was salvageable to facilitate various evil plans across the globe. Sly and the gang make it their mission to recover the parts, and presumably destroy them so they can no longer be used for nefarious purposes. Unlike the first game where there is one villain for one world, some villains take 2 entire worlds to bring down. While I wouldn't say they are now complex characters, this dramatic increase in screen time does make them more memorable. The main exception to this is the game's false villain, Arpeggio. He assembles the Clockwork parts in a bid to build a new body and achieve immortality. He gets about as much screen time as it takes to say those exact words and is summarily murdered and replaced by Agent Neela, who decides that she wants immortality, thank you very much. She also names herself Klakla, which isn't important, I'm just very easily amused by goofy names. Part 3. New Friends, Old Thieves. Structurally, the game is broken up into 8 episodes. First, you are dropped into an explorable hub world with some collectible clue bottles to find. You do a recon mission, which gives you the lay of the land, then 3 or 4 prep missions where you disable security systems, steal blueprints, and the like. Then another set of missions where you take more drastic steps towards the execution of the heist. Then finally, the heist itself, where you usually play as all 3 characters, each acting in their own capacity to successfully carry out the heist. In theory, this is a fun mission structure. Pulling off a heist can be a lot of fun, and the boss fights are mostly a big improvement over the last game. Mostly. However, in practice, you end up doing what is essentially the same set of 8 missions over about 19 hours. This formula begins to wear thin after a while. Jailbreak chapter notwithstanding, the formula remains identical throughout the game. This doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. Sly 1 had an identical mission structure for each world, and it worked well enough for that game. In Sly 2, however, instead of a small hub area like the last game, we are given an open-world free-roam area from which to access story missions. These hubs encourage you to explore them with the clue in a bottle collectibles, and while they do add to each world, and were usually the first thing I did when I started a new episode, they just made me wish for more variety in the mission structure. The hubs grant a level of expression the scripted missions simply do not. I'll go into this more later, but the problem I have here is not with the hubs themselves or with the missions themselves, it's with the contrast between the two. There is something of a structural whiplash going from a hub to a mission. On one hand, I have total exploratory freedom where consequences are light, and on the other, I have to start this level over if I walk this barrel into a spotlight one time. Before diving more into the missions, I need to discuss the addition of Bentley and Murray as playable characters. I already said I love their newfound focus as a narrative device, but I find that their implementation as playable characters to be half-baked at best. The first and most important problem, especially since this is a sucker punch game, is their lack of mobility. Sly himself has no problem navigating the world. He can climb pipes, jump from point to point, and eventually glide, Breath of the Wild style. Bentley and Murray do not have this flexibility. Bentley has an okay but expensive unlockable hover pack, and Murray can jump well enough, but both of them struggle to navigate the world in a way Sly simply does not. Now, I am aware that Sly is the acrobat of the trio, and that character-wise, it makes sense for Bentley and Murray not to have these skills. But from a design standpoint, when 2 of your 3 characters are significantly less fun to navigate with, in a game built primarily around navigation, you have a big problem. Bentley in particular became my least favorite to play. In addition to having a harder time getting from the hideout to missions, he also goes down much easier in combat. While he does have a melee attack and bombs, in practice he is much smaller than the other 2 characters, and is swarmed much more easily if you get caught. Stealth sections are also much harder as Bentley. Because of his fragility, he opts for a Metal Gear Solid style tranquilizer gun that knocks guards out in one hit. However, if you miss your mark, any nearby enemies will immediately run to the location you shot the dart from. The finicky camera only makes this problem worse, as missing often means getting killed. Since Bentley is the brains of the operation, I do like the idea that his section should require more thought. At the end of the day, though, I found Bentley's disadvantages more irritating than interesting. Murray does not have nearly the same difficulty navigating the open world that Bentley does, although he still cannot interact with it in any meaningful way. However, he makes up for this by being the most durable of the 3 leads. Taking on guards in one-on-one combat is a dangerous proposition as Sly and Bentley. Murray, on the other hand, can take them on no problem. This is a great change of pace from the other 2 less physically strong characters, and makes fighting as Murray the best part of playing as him. This does not, however, mean that combat is now suddenly good. Murray is still a rough around the edges character to play, and combat is still pretty simple. Although characters are more durable, both you, the player, and enemies do take more damage to take down, it's still pretty much a simple button-mashing affair. Outside of the open world, both of these characters play just fine. Within spaces specifically designed for them, they play great. Therein lies the problem, though. The open world is designed for Sly, and not for the other 2 members of the Cooper gang. In theory, I like the idea of portraying each heist as more of a group effort. Ultimately, though, I think their inclusion required more time and attention to fully reach their potential. Part 4. Freedom and Linearity. Without further ado, let's discuss the missions themselves. As I mentioned before, every level starts out with a recon mission. You must infiltrate the villain's headquarters, take a few photos that give Bentley enough information to plan the next steps of the heist, and then get out. This is a great way to set up an episode, and I don't really have any notes on it. I'm about to talk at length about repetitive mission design, but I am not including the recon missions in that discussion for the simple reason that these missions introduce the new open world to the player. As I said previously, I found the hub areas to be gorgeous to look at and fun to explore in the form of hunting for clue collectibles. So, any mission that sets me about exploring such an interesting space is fine with me. Now, not all of these hubs are created equal. Episode 8 in particular suffers from a lack of options when it comes to reaching certain places on the map, but by and large, these areas are excellent. When you do actually arrive at the missions themselves, you might find the playing of them lacking in interest. While the basic stealth mechanics and platforming remain intact in the first game, the missions are very repetitive. If I had a nickel for every time Bentley told me that we needed 3 thingamajigs, but to get them, we first needed to pickpocket 6 keys off of various guards without alerting them, or we would have to restart to the last checkpoint, I would have enough to buy a different game. The game does try to make some of these objectives more interesting than others, such as Sly needing to steal a disguise so we can get close to Carmelita in Episode 3, or Bentley's tomb raiding in Episode 5, but these are exceptions to the rule, with most missions being rather forgettable. To be clear, I am not complaining about being asked to steal over and over again in a game where you play as a thief. I am complaining that I must steal in exactly the same way over and over again in a game where you play as a band of theoretically very creative thieves. The Thief franchise solves this problem by putting the creativity of the thief directly in the hands of the player. Should you use a water arrow to extinguish a torch and make use of the resulting darkness, or should you use a rope arrow and climb up a floor to go around the patrolling guards? Sly 2's thieves have their creativity bound up in the narrative. This is not inherently a bad thing, but it does mean that the player is subject to whatever the game designer chooses to have Sly and the gang do. So if the designer gets to make all the plans, and gets to tell Bentley to tell me how I should execute the plan, then the plan had better be a fun one. Sometimes these plans are fun. Raiding the trains in Episode 6 called ahead to Uncharted 2 in a fun way. But often they are the same style of mission with the same kind of get 3 MacGuffins and then return to base structure over and over again. My issue here is not with the structure itself. Plenty of games structure their games in a repetitive fashion. My issue is that the structure is so nakedly obvious that I could have set my clock to it. A little more polish would have gone a long way to making the game a lot more likable and a lot less dull from my perspective. Then there are the gimmick missions. Those of you who saw my Sly 1 review will recall that I wasn't a big fan of these levels. I thought they lacked polish and would have done better as optional content. Sly 2's gimmick missions appear to have gotten more attention in the grand scheme of things, but still retain a lot of the frustration present in the previous game. Bentley's RC helicopter was sometimes fun to use. When you use it to defend Murray, however, who moves about 50% too slow for me to consistently stay near him, it was an exercise in irritation. The various turret sections fell victim to an overcorrecting camera which seemed determined to get me to aim anywhere but where I wanted. But probably the biggest missed opportunity here are Bentley's hacking minigames. From a narrative standpoint, this is Bentley's thing. He is the team hacker, and to see that reduced to a pretty bad twin-stick shooter was rather disappointing. Don't get me wrong, hacking minigames that double as twin-stick shooters can be fun, looking at you, Nier Automata. But there isn't as much skill required to beat them. As long as you orbit the enemies in roughly circular patterns and occasionally fire at the force field, you'll have finished the level in no time at all. As always, though, I am impressed with Sucker Punch's ambition. While they are not always fun, the dedication to showcasing the different skills of the Cooper Gang is respectable, if nothing else. Overall, I was disappointed with the missions in Sly 2. I thought there was a lot more texture to them in the last game, but with an increased scope came an increased opportunity for failure. Sly 2 wants to be a globe-trotting adventure with various different kinds of heists, but its recycled mission structure, reliance on repetitive objectives, and gimmick-focused special missions leaves it without the novelty that it so desperately needs. Part 5. Conclusion. Sly 2 is a fascinating game to me. It has so many things about it that I love, and so many things about it that I didn't. It excels at some aspects of gameplay, and others fall completely on their face. I found the story to be an improvement, but found the new playable characters lacking. I loved the art direction, and deeply disliked the repetitive mission design. As a whole, I think Sly 2 is greater than the sum of its parts, but I don't think it ranks as one of the best games of all time. For me, Sly 2 is an interesting series of experiments, some of which worked, and others not so much. For the curious, Sly 2 is currently available on the PlayStation 4 and 5 store for a very reasonable price and with trophy support. But what did you think of Sly 2 Band of Thieves? Have you been a fan from day one, or are you a latecomer like me? Let me know in the comments, and stay tuned for more PS2 in review. So this doesn't fit anywhere in the video, but I just had to talk about it. While I was researching old reviews of this game, I noticed that Metacritic lists The Edge magazine as giving the lowest score for Sly 2 at a 6 out of 10. One small problem, they cite the wrong issue. They actually cite the one from December of 2005, when that issue contained the review of Sly 3. The issue that has the review of Sly 2 is the one from December of 2004, a whole year earlier, though they did somehow get the review score right. Don't ask me why. I don't know who's going to fix this, but I thought I would tell all of you.